I believe because I grew up in a Christian home, because I grew up in a fantastic church. I heard some of the greatest evangelists in the world when I was a boy growing up. I was in the choir. I was in the, we'd have evangelists come to town, and I would be one of those teenagers who was counseling other people how to get saved. You know, I could read the brochure to them. And so I believe a lot of them did. God used His Word, not me. But the truth is that I believe that night God was saying, this is your last call. This is the last shot you're going to get. And so, that was important. But you formerly were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord, so walk as children of light. We need to walk in that light. We need to continuously be changing that. Now, there are some warnings here, though. There's a misuse. Look at verse 15. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. Now listen to me very carefully. We've got a lot of incognito Christians. Amen? We've got a lot of folks who want to cover it up. I'll tell you this story. It was kind of funny. I was telling the man I met on a cruise ship, Charles. When I went to my first pastor, of course, there again, I'm country boy. Went to my first pastor, and I'm wearing overalls, and I've been splitting wood for the pastoral and getting it all ready. At about 10:30 or 11 o'clock, I realized I need a haircut bad. And it's Saturday afternoon almost, and they're fixing to close the barbershop. I better get down there. I've only been in town a few weeks. Now, you got to understand, in these small towns where they own the pastoral, you're a marked man to start with. Because when you move in, they knew who moved out. And they knew who's going to move in after you, the next preacher. Well, I go to the barbershop. I got wood chippings on me, in my hair, where else. And I sit down in there, and the place is packed. You know how barbershops are. A little country town. I mean, they're yakking and carrying on and what have you. And this guy steps through the door and takes one look and says, "Hey, preacher, hey, clean out." I'll tell you what's the truth. You'd have thought the place was on fire. I mean, they're all gone. Well, I guess I'm next. I got to skip ahead of the line. It didn't take me long to get a haircut that day. But the truth is, we've got to allow the light to shine. Now, we don't need to be mean-spirited about it. We don't need to turn people off. I remember one thing that happened, too, when I was a teenager. And I know these guys who are in music, they could understand this. We used to do a choir tour every summer, a big one, and went all over the Southeast and what have you. And we went to a Stuckey's somewhere, I think it was in Mississippi. And we had 2 bus loads of kids, and they refused to serve us because the church before us had stolen things and broken things and everything else, and just made it odious for us. And we assured them we would, but they wouldn't do business with us. They lost those sales that day. And I think that one of the things we got to be careful about is, see, I'm not worried about my reputation, but I am ultimately cautious about my testimony. That's far more important. What somebody thinks of me just because they don't know me, that's one thing. I couldn't care less. But if there's something going on in my life that is darkness rather than light, that is not salt, then I don't want that to affect. I remember that first pastor too. They told me that I could get free checks. Now, nowadays that's kind of a common thing, but they told me I could get free checking if they let me put Reverend on my check. And I knew who passed through that town before, and I said, "No, ma'am, I'll pay the fee every month, because I don't want anybody to think I'm going to bounce bad checks." And for those of you who end up on the search committee, be careful about that. All right? We don't need nobody leaves that in their way. But it says, and he was saying to him, "A lamp is not bought to be put under a basket or under a bed. It is bought to be put on the lampstand." The way Luke put it in 8:16, "Now, no one after lighting a lamp covers it over with a container or puts it under a bed, but puts it on a lampstand so it may be seen by all who are in the house." Luke 11:33, Jesus again says the same thing in different words. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it away in the cellar, nor under a basket, but on a lampstand, so those who enter may see the light. There are those around us who want to shut our light down, but we can't let it happen. No matter what it costs us, we've got to be. Now, again, if they are offended by us, if we have turned them off to Jesus because of what we do. I was also telling somebody today, I went to seminary with a guy, and he was pastoring a church in Madison Heights, Virginia, and I led the music for him. And I can't remember his name now, but when we go out knocking on doors, if they didn't want to let him in, he would force his way in, stick his foot in the door, and not let them close it, and push his way in. And I mean, I'd stay out on the porch. I mean, that's the wrong way to do it. Well, about 3 years later, I was kind of communicating with some of us that had graduated together, and I asked about him. He said, yeah, he did that one time too many and pushed into a family where they were in a gathering for the death in the family, and somebody shot and killed him. And I thought, whoa, I mean, but it's just, we all knew he was headed in the wrong direction when he was doing it. Now, there can be a misunderstanding too. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, in whose case the God of this world has blinded their minds of the unbelieving, so they may not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. See, that's the thing. Satan wants to blind people. Satan wants to make sure they don't see the light. I think about how many, including my own son, young people that I know, that Jesus, and that Satan knows he can't do away with the light once they're saved. And in some cases, the only way to close the light out is to stuff them out. Whether it's through drugs, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through terrible situations they get into or whatever, so they don't affect anybody else. And then 2 Corinthians 6:14 also says this, do not be bound together with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness and lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? Now, I know that most people, when they read that text, or that, moving out a few centuries, that read that text, are thinking about marriage only. But I want to tell you something. It's one thing to be an employee of somebody else, but it's another thing to go into partnership with somebody who is a non-believer. I had a brother-in-law who was part owner in back before all the CVS's and the Rexalls and all the other pharmacies showed up everywhere, chains. In the South, you had your own personal pharmacist. And in his case, in Thompson, Georgia, they were connected to the hospital physically. So you had to go through the pharmacy to leave the hospital, and guess who they wrote all their prescriptions, pads on that pharmacy. So, I mean, it was gold line. But his partner was a non-believer. Now, he was an elder in a church, but he was still a non-believer. And I'll never forget when Wayne wanted that every time somebody got married, he wanted to give that new couple a Bible. And they had a knockdown drag out of it. No, sir, we're not spending money. Now, he'd spend money on all kinds of other stuff. He'd send them some alcohol or whatever, but he wasn't about to do that. But we got to be careful about light and darkness trying to combine. It doesn't work. It never has and never will. Now, it's also a misfit. John 3:19 says, this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light. Why? Because their deeds were evil. They love staying in the dark. You think about, now, it tells you how bad our day is. Now listen to me carefully. It tells you how close we are to the Lord coming back. Today, they'll do in broad daylight what they used to only do in the dark. Now, but the ones that are just getting started the first time, the ones that are trying it out, the thieves, the robbers, and what they do, they wait for nightfall. They break in. They do it in the dark. Now, most important thing I'll say all night, look at verse 16. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. It is not about us. It's about. For years, we had all the scientists telling us that light came from the sun and was reflected on the moon and all this other stuff. And in our generation, they figured out light is independent of itself. And here's the thing. We're not the light. We're the light holders. We're the reflectors. Remember what John said? They came and said, are you the one? John said, no, not me. I am not that light, but I am sent to give witness to that light. That is the light that lights all men who come to the world. When I read that text, John chapter 1, it always occurs to me that I want one day somebody to say there was a man sent from God. His name was Don. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness